All right, I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of the City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Here.
Mr. Ammons.
Here.
How did you know you're first?
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe. Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mayor Preston.
Here.
Great. So we're here. Is there going to be a staff report at this time? Yes, there is. Okay, you do also. Great. So we're going to have a couple staff reports. Please, with Anna.
I just wanted to let you know that we've rolled the mobile meter app out across the city of Urbana now. And this is the same parking app that the city of Champaign is using. We're hopeful that the university will eventually follow suit as well to make it seamless across the community. But if you haven't tried it, I encourage you to do that. It makes paying your parking meter very easy. I've used it many times. You can keep track of time remaining on your meter, get reminder notifications before your session expires, extend your time, and of course, coins and cash keys still work at all of our meters. So there are options.
Okay, thanks. Charlie, question?
Elizabeth, while you're here, I think probably ought to let people know that you rolled out an RFP too, didn't you? New.
Oh, yes. IT, finance, community development, and public works all work together on an IT for various software products, including for finance, a new financial management system. So that'll be a lengthy process with extensive review, reference checking, probably site visits for us in finance because it's so critical for us to make the right choice. And that RFP also includes components related to public works work orders and some community development inspection activities.
Great. Thanks so much. Anybody else have a question for this? All right, Libby Tyler, Community Development, staff report.
Some announcements to start. A couple of certifications of community development staff. I wanted to recognize Natalie Kenny Marquez has been certified as a certified market manager. She completed the curriculum offered by the Illinois Farmers Market Association in conjunction with the Michigan Farmers Market Association and got that completed just last week. Also heard last week that Nick Hansen, who is our new housing inspector, has passed his certification under the International Code Council as a property maintenance inspector. So congratulations to Natalie and to Nick. Coming up tomorrow will be our business and development lunch, again at the Urbana Civic Center. Council members are invited, and we'll be talking about some of the new development incentives, in particular the Urbana Enterprise Zone and Solar Urbana Champaign, as well as the proposed new downtown Urbana TIF district. Wednesday at 7 to 8 will be that How to Research Your Old House workshop at the library, and that is being sponsored by the City of Urbana and PACA, or Preservation and Conservation Association of Champaign County, and will be presented by Brian Adams and Alice Novak. And Alice is the chair of our Historic Preservation Commission. So that will be in Lewis Auditorium, Wednesday, February 24th, 7 to 8. I passed out an announcement from Crime Stoppers of Champaign County. They are looking for nominations for the Dave Benton Crime Fighting Award. It's an annual award named in memory of Dave Benton, and this is for citizens of Urbana, Champaign County, but in Urbana who have been helpful in fighting crime, and is open to anyone in Champaign County who's involved in some type of ongoing program or activity that's helping to reduce crime and make a positive difference in the community. And it has the contact there. There's a website, 373tips.com. fill out the form. Deadline's June 1. And then there's also a phone number. John Hecker is the president of the Board of Directors of Crime Stoppers of Champaign County at 356-8391. We provided this announcement at their request to the different neighborhood groups in Urbana and posted it on our website. So we're looking for some nominations from our Urbana citizens. And finally, we've got some bicycle training coming to Champaign, Urbana, bike enthusiasts. Traffic Skills 101, and that will be in March 5th or 12th. This will be at the CUMTD offices. And then League of American Bicyclists Smart Cycling Curriculum for League Cycling Instructors. Well, higher level will be coming in June. And I can certainly provide information on this, and comes to us from the Safe Routes to School project and the Mass Transit District, and in conjunction with Champaign County Bikes. And yeah. So part of our gold level here, keeping people educated. Any questions?
Where's the luncheon again?
Tomorrow
Where?
at noon at the Urbana Civic Center. Yeah.
Okay, and the mayor had also report.
Yeah, we've been having some discussions with Champaign about serving the campus area. We have an agreement with Champaign and with the university that's been in effect for about 18 years. And the city of Champaign is going to be discussing hiring a consultant to look at the whole boundary between the two cities to see what would be the most efficient way to serve the people. I'm not real sure if we need to hire a consultant, because I think we have the statistics from MetCAD, but in some cases Champaign is measuring when their equipment leaves the fire station and when it arrives at the scene differently than Urbana is. We do what's called wheel-to-wheel. When our truck leaves, that's when we tell MetCAD we're leaving, and Champaign has been telling MetCAD when their command car leaves, and the trucks are usually behind the command car by some time because the command car driver does not have to get all suited up in fire protection gear. And in some instances, they've been counting when the command car gets to the scene as when everybody gets to the scene from Champaign. And we've had our firefighters waiting there for Champaign, and ours are, we do it, as I said, from wheel to wheel. So we'd have to be measuring using the same standards before we could really compare which city could serve a particular property better. But at least the discussion is progressing.
Thank you, Mayor. So let's then go to the next item, which is approval of the minutes of our previous meeting from February 8th, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Diane Marlin and Eric Jacobson has seconded. Are there any corrections to that minutes? Seeing none, those in favor of approving indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, those are approved. Now we come to public input. So far I have one card, and this is from Bishop King Jr. and Evelyn Underwood. They wish to, they do not wish to address the Committee of the Whole at this time, but they ask that their positions be entered into the record, indicating that they are still continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. So thank you again for keeping us on our toes. All right. We have a request for, on a similar topic, from Eldris Melinda Carr, who also wishes to comment that she is concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. All right. And then Darrell Cruz, do you want to speak at this time? At the time. Thank you, then. And, okay, I'll watch for that. All right. All right. So to go into the ordinances themselves, closing public input, unless there's any other on city council who's got a comment to share with the public. Seeing none, all right. Ordinance number 2016-02-011, an ordinance repealing ordinance number 2015-06055, and amending the Urbana City Code, Chapter 22, Section 22-45.1. This has to do with the municipal gas use tax of 2016. Elizabeth Hanna.
Yes, this would repeal the gas tax ordinance you passed in June, and it would establish a new gas tax at 5 cents per therm effective on April 1st. Unfortunately, the notification was not made to Ameren of the change in the rate, and it was not implemented, so we need to basically have a do-over on this one.
Are there any questions for financial? Yes. Okay,
I'd move
Charlie.
to send this to council, recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, Charlie Smythe, seconded by Aaron Ammons. Any discussion on this topic? Those in favor? Oh, yes, Michael Madigan.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say that I oppose the original ordinance to increase this tax. So my no vote is just to keep consistent with that. It has no reflection on what has happened with regard to the failure to notify.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
There's one opposed. Okay, that will be sent to council with a recommendation of approval. Next comes ordinance number 2016-02-012, an ordinance revising the fiscal year 2015-16 annual budget, PSEBA benefits, bond proceeds, parking fund budgets, and gas masks. Again, financial. Want to help us with that?
Yes, certainly. This budget amendment includes several items. The first one listed here is for what we refer to as PSEBA benefits. Under the Illinois Public Safety Employee Benefits Act, the city is required to provide health insurance benefits for public safety employees who suffer a catastrophic injury or death in the line of duty. Currently, we have 2 former police officers receiving PSEBA benefits, but this has never actually been budgeted, and so this would correct what I consider to be an error in budgeting. Second item is rebudgeting 2 line items for capital improvements in the parking fund. That was just an oversight at the time we were handling rebudgets earlier in the fiscal year. This is for 2 lighting projects that are managed by the Public Works Department. With regard to the bond proceeds for the Boneyard Creek, there's a small balance remaining from the bond proceeds in that fund, and in order to spend it, we need to have a budget. We had expected that it would all be spent by the end of last fiscal year. The last item is accelerating the replacement of some gas masks for the police department. There's a significant discount available at this time, and so they asked that we accelerate that purchase rather than let it wait until next year, which makes sense given the discount.
All right, thank you. Are there questions?
Yeah.
Well, we'll start with this end. Diane Marlin.
I was just going to move it.
Oh, okay. Charlie, do you want to pass a question then?
No, mine's a question. The garage lighting, the parking lighting's been talked about for some time. Is it actually going to happen this year? Mayor, I don't know.
Actually, Bill gave me some information on that. So the downtown parking lot lighting, they expect to get back to work on that later this year and complete the plans and specifications. The replacement of street lights on campus was suspended due to the work effort on the MCOR project, but he's hoping that the design plans and specifications could be completed in the next 6 to 12 months.
So is there a motion then? Oh, we have more questions? Okay,
Yeah,
Eric.
I'll second, and I just want to make a comment, Elizabeth, that I really appreciate how promptly and carefully you bring these to our attention. because in past, pre-you, that wasn't always the case.
Then Aaron Ammons?
So the operating fund, the PSEBA that you're putting in, this is going to be an expenditure that we put in for every year. You're proposing that we'll have this in allotted just for,
Yes, we will have a line item specifically for this purpose so that we can track it. This line item is in the police department because it relates to former police department employees. It's possible in the future that we could have to pay PSEBA benefits for fire employees as well.
and the $242,000, this is something that's already been budgeted, and we just overlooked it? I don't know if I understand, for the capital improvements in the parking fund.
Oh, right. These were items that were budgeted in last fiscal year. Often, especially with capital improvement projects, timing is an issue. So after the end of the fiscal year, we came back and amended the budget to roll forward the funds that were not spent before the end of last fiscal year, but we just missed these two projects.
So I guess I'm confused how we miss projects. How do you balance the budget and miss projects? I don't understand.
Well, it's because we don't automatically rebudget everything that's remaining, so there was a list that went back and forth. Went from me to Public Works, where I identified remaining funds, and I asked them to identify what they thought needed to be rebudgeted, and there was just a communication issue when the list came back. I did not realize that they intended to do that for these two projects.
But this $242,000 was budgeted for the parking.
Yes, it was in last year's budget and was not spent.
So when we have, I guess this is a Bill Gray question, but it's along the lines of what Charlie was saying. If it's budgeted and we have the money there, then why don't we do the project?
I think in the case of these two projects, it was really an issue of staff time and priorities.
And then the last one, when we have departments, and they have budgets already, so in the case of the gas mask, is this something that the chief just can do on his own? Why, are we paying for this, or is it coming out of his budget? You understand what I'm saying? Is it a general
Well-
fund thing, or is it?
Well, actually, it's in the Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund. So, yes, we, the city, are paying for it, but it's a line item that was designated for this purpose for the police department.
And we're just speeding it up, because we were going to buy them anyway.
We were going to buy them anyhow, but they were in the they would have been in next year's budget according to the plan.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And then Bill Brown.
Yeah, I just had a question on the breakdown of the parking fund expenditures. You said there were two projects, and then on the Exhibit A, it lists the two projects, and one of them was campus area light improvement for $242,000, the other one's under $80,000, but the total is $242,000. Should that add up to a different total, or should one of those be different?
Oh, you are right. It looks like I made an error there, so I will get that corrected before the next meeting.
So is the campus area light thing supposed to be smaller, and the total is 242?
I think the total is supposed to be larger, but I've got to verify that against the general ledger.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. Others? Yeah, Mike Madigan.
So, with regard to the PSEBA benefits, I noticed that, or I thought that I saw in your narrative that these were items that were generally spread out among other line items.
Yeah, the way that health insurance costs were allocated in the past was, I'm going to say, not as accurate as I would like. They were just generally the total amount was divided and spread among all the budgets. And so what happened then with the PSEBA benefit specifically was that was just spread to various line items across the city. It wasn't called out as a separate item.
Okay, so that gets my question then. Why are we not then reducing the lines where these benefits were being appropriated and then amalgamating them into this one line?
Well, they weren't appropriated in this year's budget because this year we did very detailed projections for all salaries and benefits based precisely on the positions and the benefits assigned to various positions.
Okay, maybe I didn't read the memo right. Then what you're saying is these were actually not budgeted at all in any line.
I don't think they ever were budgeted in any line,
Okay.
right?
That answers that question. So the parking lighting improvement projects, could you please just let me know what those are specifically?
Sure. One of them is for downtown parking lot lighting. The other is for replacement of streetlights on campus, including Nevada, Oregon, Illinois, Gregory, and Matthews Streets.
Is this an upgrade from some older technology to LED, or what is the, I mean, $180,000 is a lot of lighting.
Yeah, lighting is expensive, but
Sure.
I would prefer to get that answer from Public Works, and I'll get that for you.
Okay, well, maybe Charlie can answer it, yeah.
Yeah, Charlie, do you want to comment?
I think vaguely it's,
Oh,
like, the lot across here has broken lights and stuff. I think it includes some of the surface parking and the parking deck. Is that right, Diane?
I don't
Diane,
know
do you
about downtown. I can tell you I worked on Nevada Street, and the streetlights on Nevada Street on campus between Lincoln and Goodwin especially are in terrible condition.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, right.
So we failed to replace broken lighting in the last fiscal year, and we pushed that a year?
Well, there's alternative lighting out there. They were trying to get a complete as I understand it, they were trying to do a complete study of their lighting needs for the parking system in the downtown area.
Okay.
So,
Well, it'd be nice to have somebody refresh us on that next week. I'm certainly not holding you to that.
yeah, no, it's it started before you came on the council.
Okay. It'd be nice to have a little bit of a refresher on that next week before we vote on this, I would think. I mean, I don't think I have a problem with it. It'd just be nice to know. That's a chunk of money. So I think it's a fair question to ask. Yeah, and that would be all. Thank you.
I
Yeah,
will add,
Charlie?
the campus lights are more than 50 years old. They're rusted poles and stuff like that. So it's just time to replace those in their normal life cycle.
Great, so now we have some background on that. All right, so we're talking about ordinance 2016-02-012. Is there, we have a motion and a second. Those in favor indicate, of sending this to council with approval, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's sent to council. Ordinance number 2016-02-013, an ordinance approving a redevelopment agreement with Central Illinois Soccer Enterprises, LLC, 2400 North Willow Road. This is Soccer Planet. And Community Development, Elizabeth?
Yes, so the agreement that is attached, the proposed agreement, is for a proposed new expansion to the current Soccer Planet building located at 2400 North Willow Road in TIF 4. Just a little background on the project. In 2011, the city entered into an agreement with Central Illinois Soccer Enterprises for a new 24,000 square foot indoor soccer facility. The facility had a construction cost of around $1.5 million and included a soccer field, indoor, small cafe, and retail center. Central Illinois Soccer Enterprises run soccer games in the indoor field and have actually recently seen growth in the use of the facility for dog training. So for the previous facility, the city provided incentives at 70% of incremental value generated from the project for 10 years at a cap of $300,000. The facility added new employment opportunities and provides annual revenues to the city through property tax, food and beverage tax from the cafe, and retail taxes from the store. The project saw high success and had higher EAVs actually than anticipated. So that agreement is actually ongoing and is expected to complete in 2022. So the new project that is proposed is an expansion to the facility, and it's requesting similar incentives to that first building. So the building would be 26,000 square feet and have an estimated cost of $1.3 million. Additional parking would be added, and the dry detention basin would be relocated. Additional space would remain for an outdoor soccer facility at the site. The project is estimated to be completed at the end of 2016. The attached agreement would provide incentives at 70% again of the incremental value using the 2015 EAV as a base value. That would be through the end of the TIF in 2025 and once again at a cap of $300,000. So based on the prior building performance, the full $300,000 is expected to be reached with that 8 remaining years of the TIF. And the city is expected to break even after 11 years. The two agreements will overlap through 2022. So the city will provide 70% of the incremental value, total taxes resulting, from incremental value from the project, the old project and the new project, through that time. And then upon the completion of the other agreement at 2022, it will be solely based, the 70% only from the new project, based on the 2015 EAV. So fiscal impacts, both the costs and revenues associated with this redevelopment agreement will be realized through the incremental value in TIF 4. Also, in addition to TIF increment gain, the city is expected to see additional revenues through food and beverage tax from additional sales at the site cafe and retail shop. Central Illinois Soccer Enterprises would like to hold regional soccer tournaments in the future. They do have some plans for that, and that could generate additional economic activity through hotel-motel tax as well as food and beverage tax. The amount of taxes to be paid are estimated to result in an annual benefit to the TIF of around $17,400 through year 8, while the TIF is still in effect, and then $57,000 thereafter. Staff recommends approval, and are there any questions?
I'll take questions. And is Mr. Berry in the audience?
Yes, he is.
Okay. All right. Did Mr. Berry want to say anything before we have a comment on or questions?
I don't have anything to add, but I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. It was a good presentation from our staff. That was it. All right. Questions or a motion? Okay.
I'd
Mike
move approval.
Second.
Okay. Mike Madigan, and seconded by Diane Marlin. Yes. And then Bill Brown.
I just wondered how you arrived at the rebate cap, since it's a smaller expenditure than last time. The rebate cap's the same. Does it involve what the reimbursable expenses are from TIFs? I mean, is there more infrastructure work?
It's a larger building, so we do expect it to perform about the same. And because it's at that 70%, we expect it to reach the cap based off of how it performed. If it is less of an expense, it probably will be assessed lower, and it might perform differently EAV, and it might be a lower amount that might end after that 8 year. So we base that just upon that other agreement because we do feel that they're pretty similar projects.
So,
okay.
And Brandon, do you want to make a comment further to answer that?
I believe the initial project included much more site preparation and other site improvements. And in this instance, we're really just looking at the building and focusing on that. There's actually a parking lot that'll be constructed on the parcel to the north, and that is being fully excluded from this agreement. So there are other expenses that perhaps were factored in that original number from the previous agreement.
And then, Aaron, did you have a question?
I was just trying to see if there were numbers as to how much the city has benefited or received thus far based upon the initial agreement.
Mm-hmm. I do have those values not on me. I can get those to you. As I said, the EAV has actually been higher, so we've been getting that 30%, and it's actually been more than was projected initially.
Okay, I would like to
But I
see
can
it.
get
Thank
those
you.
numbers.
Great. It's always good to have a project that's ever more successful than you thought it would be. Other comments? Mike Madigan.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is it's an outstanding business in Urbana. We should do everything we can to encourage its expansion, and we have a unique opportunity here to see the performance of the initial phase of the business, and so this addition to the business should perform equally as well. Soccer is clearly the most popular upcoming sport in America. And this is something that the region doesn't have, but for in the city of Urbana.
Okay.
I'm going to second Mike's motion.
On that thought.
To approve, I mean, you made a motion to approve. I'm going to second your motion. And
I already said.
Oh, you
Diane
did
Marlin.
already? Oh, Diane already did.
Diane Marlin
Sorry.
picked that up, but we can have a third because it's so popular.
Well, I'll just comment that I'm struck dumb with admiration. I have nothing else to say.
Okay. Mayor Pressing.
I just wanted to say that it's the most popular sport internationally, and this is an international city, a small international city.
But still at the forefront of life. Okay, thank you. Diane Marlin.
Well, and I know I've been told over the years that there's a real demand for a place to hold volleyball tournaments, and people now are driving to Bloomington and Decatur and all over the place. So I hope you can host some tournaments, and I think it'll make a big difference in people saving gas and staying local. So.
Great. Charlie has no comment.
I may have to get my reffing license again.
Good. All right, so we're looking at ordinance number 2016-02-013. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's forwarded to City Council with approval. Let's look at ordinance number 2016-02-014, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Article 3, Section 3-40, and adding new Section 3-51, providing for compliance with new state statute concerning responsible alcoholic beverage server training. This is under the mayor's office.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so because I'm a liquor license holder in the city of Urbana, I am required by state law to recuse myself from this overbearing regulation.
Well, thank you, and we will miss you.
Okay.
Indeed. Mayor, can you
Yes.
enlighten us, please?
The Illinois legislature passed a law. They actually passed a law. That was really good. So this is training for servers, and it's called Bassett because it's for, well, they had it spelled out, so it makes sense, but I can't read it right now. Anyway, oh yeah, here it is. Beverage alcohol sellers and servers education training. So we're changing our ordinance to require this as part of getting a liquor license in Urbana. And also, the highly qualified Jolinda Ross is a teacher of Bassett. So she will be able to train other people so that all the establishments in this fair city, this fair international city, will have training as required by state law.
So that no bartender will ever spill a drink in front of you again. Is that correct? Or even on you.
I had a question.
Yes, the question comes from Diane Marlin.
Is this available online? This
The training, well, that's a good question. I think she's a trainer, so I think that it's not just online. I think you have to have some kind of personal interaction with the teacher, but I will ask that question and give you an answer by next week.
Oh, it's online for $14, I was just told.
Well, anyway, she's a certified trainer, so I'll get you more information on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's so excellent. All right, Charlie Smythe.
Yeah, how does this affect, say, the folks that serve at Sweet Corn Festival? Because I think many of them are volunteers.
Well, I don't know about volunteers. I think everybody that serves has to be trained, whether they're a volunteer or not.
And I think that in the ordinance it says that there are certain exclusions, certain liquor licenses are excluded from this, and I'm not sure if that is one of those. So maybe we're going to want to have some edification in the future.
Well, it says any server who intends to sell, serve, offer for sale, or offer to serve any alcoholic beverage in an open container at a special event authorized by the city to occur on or after August 15, 2016, must have a valid Bassett certificate at the time he or she sells, serves, offers for sale, or offers to serve alcoholic beverages at such special event. That's in Section B.
Okay. Okay, I thought I had read that there was one exclusion, it was a certain type. Okay, well, I might have been wrong. Other discussion, or Eric Jacobson?
Do I understand that because of the state law, we have no choice but to pass this or else go dry?
That's a thought.
I'm not sure what the penalty is. It might not be so severe as to go dry, but it is a state law.
Well, this is a legal question. I think legal counsel has something to say.
Our attorney, Jim.
We are not obligated to adopt an ordinance, but in lieu of adopting an ordinance that does substantial clarification within the city, we are left to the vagaries of the state statute.
Diane Marlin.
Well, this states that anyone selling at an event needs to have this certification. So the question still is, does this apply to our festivals and events?
It would apply to the festivals. One of the functions that a one of the elements of the training is also how to check IDs and to make sure that, no alcohol is served to minors, whether it be served or sold to.
Well, this is going to have an impact on all the, as Charlie noted, all the volunteers, unless we have clarification on that.
If I might.
Okay, go ahead, Charlie. You wanna say something
well,
else?
I think a lot of these festivals, the people serving aren't necessarily checking IDs, but you're getting a wristband or something in advance so that you can go in and purchase alcohol. So I really think we need to clarify the procedure here before we move on this. And frankly, I don't think this is ready to go to council unless somebody can get this fixed between now and next week.
Well, I'm sure we can answer that question by next week, so you could pass it pending answering the question.
And so, Libby Tyler.
Yeah, just my experience in volunteering at Sweet Corn Festival was TIPS training, which would be similar to Bassett. And Lundy has also volunteered, and you had some training for that. So I think what they did is they brought a group of us in to the distributor, and we went through the curriculum. So I think they have a way to do massive instruction. But certainly we can find out more about how Bassett would differ from TIPS.
Aaron Edmonds.
So what does at retail mean in this?
As opposed to wholesale. Wholesalers deliver to the business and retailers sell to the public.
It's for either consumption on or off the premises, not for resale, as the mayor suggested. In other words, a package store, the seller, because it's being served, I'd have to check the statute, and it's been a while since I've looked at the ordinance itself.
And so we're talking about open containers or open liquor serving cups or whatever, plastic cups. Okay. Eric.
Who is liable for penalties of what sort if this law is violated? If, for example, we get busted by temperance union agitators?
There would be two possible penalties. One would be the server, who is not Bassett trained and cannot produce a certificate of Bassett training. And this ordinance would also make the establishment liable for a liquor license violation for hiring and allowing people who are not Bassett trained, contrary to state law, to serve alcohol at retail on their establishment.
And the person who's serving has to be able to show that they have a certification if they were asked by any law enforcement agent. Must be like a little ID card or something. Yes, Eric.
Although he recused himself, I sort of got a sense that Mr. Madigan thought that this was a bit of overreach by the government, and I must say that in this particular instance, I share his view, but I don't want to, on the other hand, I don't want to make people who are working here, leave them vulnerable to personal penalties. So I expect that I will support this, but I'll kind of support it reluctantly.
So far, there's not a motion. Does anybody want to take this to any place else other than nothing? Charlie?
Well, we could move this to council without a recommendation pending clarification.
Okay, do you want to make that motion then? No. Okay. That's
Well,
clear.
I'll make that motion, or if I'm recognized.
Yes, Eric? Dr. Jacobson? You make the motion, are you saying?
Yeah, I move that we move this to council without a recommendation.
Just to clarify, the statute defines alcohol servers as meaning persons who sell or serve open containers of alcoholic beverages at retail, and anyone whose job description entails the checking of identification for the purchase of open containers of alcoholic beverages at retail or for entry into licensed premises. So that would, based on this, I think a fair reading would include our events.
Everybody involved. Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
And this is a state law that we're supposed to be supporting, is that correct? This, our wise General Assembly approved, created this.
Because they didn't have anything else to do.
Probably sounded great to them.
I'm only going to take so much of that from y'all. Mr. Johnson.
Well, so far, this is dying for a lack of a second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Aaron?
Does this replace another?
This adjusts our ordinance to reflect the change in state law.
But does the state law replace another?
No, the state
type
law
of
has
training?
been revised to add this type of training. They may have had TIPS training before. I don't know if that was required by law, but this is now required by state law, so that's why we're
Yes.
doing it.
It was an amendment to the Liquor Code of 1934, liquor statute.
Well, all right, so, yes, Charlie Smythe.
So I've gone online and looked at this, and for $14.75, you take exams before and after. It's essentially an online, it's like ethics training or whatever. It's 4 hours long, but completely online. So it's 4 hours of your time to do this course. And it costs you $14.75.
Did our lawyer did our attorney tell us that we were going to be working with this in lieu of the fact that the city didn't create its own regulation? Am I wrong about that?
Repeat that, please.
That if the city had come up with its own regulation, that might be slightly different, that we would have been still obligated to pass this.
We're not obligated to pass this. It means that this tends to clarify the state statute. We are subject to the state statute whether or not we pass this.
Gotcha.
This also helps protect, ultimately, establishments. Should they hire somebody who is not Bassett trained and cannot produce a certificate upon request of a city official who may ask when they go in, checking for underage drinking, and then somebody leaves the premises and in an intoxicated state. A part of the Bassett training, I've actually, many years ago, went through it when I volunteered for an Oktoberfest every year for the local Chamber of Commerce for one of the municipalities up north. But Bassett-trained servers are supposed to also recognize when people have been served too much.
So there's a safety component, perhaps. Charlie Smythe.
Jim, follow up on that. How does this relate to the TIPS training, which is actually $40, from what I understand?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the TIPS training or what the costs of the various trainings are. I've not looked into that.
The distributor gave group training to many.
I would imagine this replaces TIPS training.
That'd be another question to find out.
All right, so if we decide to send this to council, we don't have to actually take action at council
No, we'll
level?
answer your questions and give you the report before you vote on it next Monday, if you send it to next Monday.
Well, let's find out. We've got a second, we got a motion and a second. So all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
And that was a motion to send it with no recommendation.
With no recommendations.
Aye.
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 I'll say aye. All right, any nays? All right, I guess we'll see it again.
Enthusiasm is overwhelming.
Welcome back, Michael. Next comes a resolution number 2016-02. 2016-007R. It's a resolution approving and authorizing. Wait a minute, we're going to have to wait for our conversations to wind down. Thank you. This is a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement for the annual Urbana Sweet Corn Festival. This is the Urbana Business Association calendar year 2016. We are very excited to hear.
Good
Yes.
evening, everybody. Okay. Okay, I'm Paris with Urbana Business Association, and I'm here to give a report on the 2015 Sweet Corn Festival and then improvements for 2016. Okay, so I'm going to just take this by categories and the most important categories of the festival that affects us the most. So I'm going to start with sponsorships. In 2015, we had 26 total sponsors of the Sweet Corn. So including the city's contribution, the festival raised $37,805 in cash sponsorships, although that did fall short $7,195 in our budgeted goal of $45,000. We also did receive $72,485 in in-kind services, so our total was $104,290. I guess in 2015, there was a new sponsorship levels that were put into place. We had hired outside marketing and talent agency to come in and handle all of the talent and production for the festival, as well as procuring the sponsorships for the festival. And also the sponsorship tiers increased in price in 2015, which actually hindered us being able to gather more sponsorships for the festival. And obviously one thing I want to point out is I wasn't here for the 2015 festival, but I have really been studying what we did in 2015 for the festival and how we can improve the results for the 2016 festival. So in each category, I will tell you what my recommendations are for 2016. So instead of taking the acquisition of sponsorships and outsourcing it, we're going to keep that in-house. I feel it's very important that we have control of that, and we are the ones that actually are developing the sponsorships and going out and recruiting those from the different businesses in town. And then as far as the types of sponsorships, I have actually come up with a few different ideas for some different levels. So there's an industry exclusive sponsorship where each industry, say the banking industry, media such as radio or whatever it may be, can be an exclusive sponsor of the Sweet Corn Festival with special benefits, and they would pay a higher rate for that particular sponsorship. Also in the past, we've only ever had a beer sponsor for the Sweet Corn Festival. So this year I'm bringing in a liquor sponsor, so I'm talking with different distributors who are obviously in contact with the different brands of liquor and finding whoever that would be willing to be the exclusive liquor sponsor of the Sweet Corn Festival, which actually would bring in a large chunk of money for that sponsorship as well. And then the barrier gates was something else that we had talked about, where businesses can actually purchase a spot in different areas of the festival and provide a banner that we would actually post for that. Okay, so then the next category would be the vendors. There was some changes that were made in 2015 as well regarding the way the vendors were handled. Their space fees for the Sweet Corn, they actually increased the amount that it costs to be at the Sweet Corn Festival and then reduced the commission that we got on the ticket sales, and this refers to the food sponsors or the food vendors. So when I looked at it, I ran some numbers, and so for 2016, I actually think it's more beneficial to actually take down the booth fees, get more vendors in there, more different types of vendors in there, create a wider variety of things that are happening within the festival, and then increase our commission back up to that 25%, because that's more, it's variable, and for us, the more sales that we're doing and the more people that we have coming through there and selling, we're actually going to gain more income that way. Okay. Any questions so far? Yeah? Okay.
So the, how would the new bill or the ordinance we just discussed that, how would that affect your idea of the beer sponsor?
Oh, you're talking about previous to me coming up here as far as the training and everything like that. It's not going to affect the sponsorships at all. And as far as the beer sponsor, we're with SCEF right now, which is Budweiser, and we're in a three-year contract with them. It's not going to affect sponsorships at all. It's going to be more on my end and operational, making sure that everybody that we have coming in as volunteers are trained and have the certification. So that is something that I will have to just make sure that we have taken care of far in advance for whoever we have coming in, probably setting up some sessions and making sure that everyone is trained.
And how much did the third party cost you, who was supposed to bring in the sponsors and all that? What was their fee, or how much were they paid?
It was actually close, and it was not necessarily, it wasn't just covering the sponsorships, it was actually covering obtaining the talent and the production of the talent for that evening and handling all of that. But the total for that was, what was it? It was close to $8,000.
Other questions? Yeah, Michael.
So you just said you're interested in, and you think it's important to reduce the space fee and increase the sales commission?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What was the sales commission last year?
As far as the percentage, it was 20%. So previous years it was 25%. They decreased it to 20%.
Okay.
Which actually hindered people coming in, getting more vendors in. So I think...
I'm sorry, what hindered them?
Because they increased the booth fee to come in, so people weren't as likely to sign up and be a vendor at the Sweet Corn Festival because it was actually more money up front. So when you're looking at, say you're a vendor and you want to come in, and people sometimes look at that investment up front more than they do on the commission end of things, because on the other end it's variable. So for them, they are looking at the more money they're making, yeah, they're going to be giving us that commission, but they're at least making money on it. If you're giving say a set amount of $400, you're not 100% sure you're going to make that $400 back. But if you're making money on the back end of it, then you know at least you're making that money back.
So if you're a mom and pop operation, you may be looking at it that way. All right. I'm in this business. I gave up the Sweet Corn Festival years ago because of the commission. Okay. The booth fee never was a factor for me. The commission, on the other hand...
I understand that. And
okay, let me finish.
I'm sorry.
So the commission, on the other hand, was prohibitive. I quit the Taste of Champagne a couple years before I quit the Sweet Corn Festival because they were at 30%. And their argument was, well, it's for charity. Well, look what's happened to the Taste of Champagne over the last several years. They've gone from having several reputable restaurants in town to having virtually none. They are almost all mom and pops, local food trucks, but there are no restaurants. It's not really a Taste of Champagne anymore.
I agree.
I'm not saying the Sweet Corn Festival is at that point, but I would strongly caution you to rethink the increase in the commission, because what you're doing is you're attracting more mom and pops, but you're keeping away people who are actually in this business on a larger scale. So it's 25%. You are at a point where if there's any kind of bad weather, if there's any kind of interruption in the festival, people like me are not interested. Literally, I don't do anything over 20%. I don't do anything. I do very few of these anymore anyway, but 20% is the max for me. 17% is usually what we try to negotiate, 15 to 17. So I understand where you're coming from. You think you're going to make more money, but you have to be very careful about who you're going to attract. And ultimately what you want is people to come for the talent and for the variety of vendors. Mm-hmm. And you're going to start hurting on the variety of vendors if you raise the commission.
Okay, yeah, and I completely understand what you're saying. Honestly, because I've looked back several years, I've looked back through the past 5-10 years of Sweet Corn Festivals, and it has been 25%. They changed it last year to 20%, so that was the first year that it happened. And if you look at the numbers, and there's a lot of factors in how the sweet corn ended up coming out last year, because there was a lot of changes. But one of the major things was the commission, and it, not to say that we always have to do something a certain way, because it's been done that way in the past, but looking at the numbers versus the 25% versus the vendor fees, it actually that particular thing did seem to be working over time. So,
Well, that's a good question.
yeah,
What seemed to be working over time? I'm sorry.
having the 25% commission versus the lower vendor fees.
Okay, well, if it's working for you, that's great. I'm just letting you know from a vendor's perspective, and I don't think
I
1
appreciate
year
that.
is a fair metric. I think you have to have a consistent and fair commission over time to attract additional quality vendors, and I think a big part of the Sweet Corn Festival ought to be to attract many quality vendors.
Absolutely agree.
And you'll do that over time with a lower commission. It may not show immediate results, but it will over time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Charlie?
Mike, you make me wonder if there's a better way to structure this, like maybe a tiered system where you could have a lower commission but a higher entry fee, and just offer, say, 2 or 3 different tiers to maybe provide for, mom and pops might be attracted by one level, but more established business like yours would be attracted by a different one. I think that's worth further discussion, and maybe you or some colleagues could sit down with UBA and maybe suggest a better structure. So I think you're looking for a sort of a break-even stream here of money. But at the same time, if we're not getting the kind of quality that we should be getting, we're not going to get the patrons because the food quality isn't there and so on. So I'd much prefer to have a large variety of food vendors at this event, and good talent to bring in lots of people from around the area. We do want it to be a quality event. So I suggest keep the conversation going after this.
Aaron Hammonds.
And so, Paris, for the bottom line, you quoted a figure of 104,290. Is that what you said?
That was including in-kind services as far as the sponsorships go. So anything that we had gotten in kind from any type of media or different types of businesses that benefited the UBA in helping the Sweet Corn Festival, that was the total of everything altogether.
And so I guess eventually in the presentation you'll talk about what the total revenue was that was generated and stuff out of the entire event.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as the vendors, does UBA track what each vendor sort of invested and what their expenditures were and what their net revenue was, or do you get that detailed?
There is. So from what I found is there is a spreadsheet that is kept, and then the vendors will give us their total tickets. We count those up, add those up, and then we just do the split to them. So there is a detailed spreadsheet that it's kept on each of the vendors that we do the split with them.
So just along the lines of this conversation, do you see any trends? Were the larger businesses more profitable than the mom and pops, or what did you all discover when you look at those numbers?
I would have to delve in that a little deeper. I can look at that and I can answer that question for you if you like.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I want to participate in the conversation, so Bill, would you take over the?
Don't do it,
chairmanship?
Bill.
Okay. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts for
Oh, yeah.
5 minutes
Or less.
or less.
So I wonder if one of the solutions that you could get would be to actually make two different booth sizes.
That is something.
And that you could have like Avenue A or Level A be the larger commercial booth with a certain fee and a certain commission. But those people who are the mom and pops might then settle for the slightly smaller space, which probably accommodate them. It would also probably help accommodate a lot of local groups and other people who would like to have a booth as well, nonprofits, NGOs, with a different rate. And maybe you can then you're buying then square footage, and it's probably then worth it for a larger person who may then also then have a couple tables to sit at in his booth area. That's just a comment. And that's my comment, so I'll take the
You can have the chair back.
chair back if I can. Thank you.
Okay, and, as far as the space goes, there are different levels of the space as far as the type of vendor that you are. And we had actually discussed, because everybody gets a 10 by 10 space, but it's depending on what type of vendor you are is the price that you pay. But we did discuss cutting down a booth space because right now it's a 10 by 10. Not everybody needs a 10 by 10 space, so we could cut it down because an average table size is going to be a 6-foot table that you need at the event. So we discussed doing maybe a 6 by 6 space and then a 10 by 10. But I do actually appreciate the idea of maybe doing the levels where they can choose their booth space versus the commission structure. I think that's a great idea too. So that's something I'll
You may not be
consider.
able to reduce space even for a local NGO or social group below 10 by 10 if that's the size of an awning. When you have to be able to provide shade or an
Yeah,
awnings.
they would be able to choose, so that's a good idea.
But you might be able to offer a 10 by 12 space or 14 space to
Yeah.
the really bigger.
Yeah.
Okay. So does anybody have any desire to make a motion?
I don't think she's done.
Oh, yeah.
No,
you're
it's
still
okay.
going. All right. I'm jumping ahead a little
Oops.
bit. Okay.
Oops. Okay, let's go back. Click something there. Okay, so, and then as far as entertainment, entertainment went well last year, but I think as far as the entertainment goes, it could be better. And I've actually looked back at previous years, and there was more variety of entertainment, I think. So this year, I'm really working on a variety of genres and more nationally known headliners. That way, because it's all connected together. So if you get good headliners in, you get more people are drinking, and then you have more income that way, and then the better sponsors that you can get for the event. So it's just a whole cycle. So we actually did hire a talent company to come in and take care of procuring the talent and running the production for this year. Yes.
Do you know the headliners, or can they be
Not
revealed?
yet.
Okay.
They've been working on it for about a week, so tomorrow morning I'm actually supposed to get my initial report from them as far as the suggestions and who's available and all the pricing and things like that.
Okay. Thanks. More?
Okay. And so the final analysis is 2015 operationally and to the public. It was a success, but we did have a financial loss. And there was a lot of things, I think, contributing to that. So you do have a copy of the P&L in front of you. I'm going to grab my copy here. So I think there were some major things that attributed to that. One is we looked at the sweet corn a little bit differently this year, which is it got pulled out of being combined with the UBA financials and is on a different fiscal year. And so because of that, there were some things that changed. As far as staff salaries, one of them, so staff salaries were taken in account on this P&L compared to previous years. The budget for entertainment went up, and also the vendor expenses. The vendor expenses are actually the amount of the commission that we gave back to the vendors. And then sponsorships were a lot lower.
How about ticket sales?
Ticket sales, they were up, but it actually was a wash because of the vendor expenses. So in ticket sales, so on the P&L, it shows total ticket sales. So that's anything that we bring in from the vendors, and it's also any of the beer sales that we get in. So on the P&L actually doesn't separate that out. But so if you were to look at the alcoholic beverages expense line and the vendor expense line, that's going to show you the expenses that go against the ticket sales income line.
Is there other cost questions? Michael?
So you're saying that the vendor expenses are food and other concessionaires combined with beer?
No,
beer
the vendor
vendors?
expenses expense line item is actually just food, like you said, the concessionaire line alone, and then if you go up to the top, alcoholic beverages is going to be for the cost of beer. So both of those technically would go against the ticket sales income line item. But the vendor expenses line, which is the food, that did go up significantly.
So where's the income from beer?
That's under ticket sales as well. So
So maybe it'd be instructive moving forward. to
yes, absolutely.
break that out.
I completely
Yeah.
agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah, so this coming year, when we do the budget and look at it, everything, I'm going to break it up very detailed.
Very
I
good.
agree.
So I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Aaron.
The tickets themselves, the paper tickets, basically cost $3,000. Is that what that says there? Is that what we're talking about?
Correct.
So just in today's era of technology, is there some way to do something other than just paper tickets?
I'm looking into that. Yeah. I am always looking at ways to cut expenses and make things more efficient and up with technology as well. So
Mike Madigan?
One suggestion there would be do what the Blues, Brews, and Barbecue guys do. Find a bank or somebody else who wants to have exclusive rights to have their names on have somebody sponsor the tickets. You know, Busey Bank, Busey was the original Sweet Corn Festival sponsor, right? So
Yeah.
maybe they'd be interested. I don't know, but somebody ought to be able to underwrite that. I think the News Gazette prints those tickets for Blues, Brews, and Barbecue, and CIB Bank sponsors the cost.
absolutely.
Bill Brown?
That's a great idea. It's even before the election, so maybe get a politician or somebody that wants their name on all those tickets.
Is that against the rules?
Well, that's, what kind of water are we treading now? Get what you pay for. Charlie?
Paris,
Yes.
and I got a little help here from Brendan. So staff salaries, are included in here in this breakout, and that seems like a valid thing because UBA staff are being used to run Sweet Corn, and if you're to sort of recover your expenses over time, as we've requested from UBA, it makes sense. But I would like to point out that staff salaries basically are equivalent to the net operating income loss here, so it's sort of a wash if you think of the UBA staff that way. we're basically running. But again, yeah, it should be.
Yes, because it does carry
But
over.
over time, you know, we've asked UBA to be more self-supporting, so it's not that, it's not, the operating loss here is more than it seems in the sense that it is because these staff salaries are being included.
And Diane Marlin.
What would you estimate the percentage of time staff spends on planning this festival?
From my understanding, I think that they were looking at 20% of the year. But I would have to look at that again. I know there
20%
was
of
an out-
everyone's time?
Just the full-time staff in the office. And then, but that also does count some part-time staff that was hired for the Sweet Corn Festival during that short period of time in the summer as well.
Aaron Amons.
So, going on along the lines of the sponsors and stuff like that, can Ameren sponsor? Can they donate the power? Who pays that? I mean, who Ameren provides it, right?
Yeah, so, let's see. Well, I guess, well, we do that through the city, so I don't know exactly how that works, but, because Public Works comes in and sets up the power, but then any additional power that we need, we actually get generators in for that, and that is something we pay for. The generators.
So when
for
you
it,
say
but-
power, I guess I don't, are you talking about generators, or are you talking about there's a bill that we owe Ameren? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, the
and see
power
if-
line item?
It's
I would have to,
$6,000.
I don't have that in front of me right now. I'm gonna assume that, are the generators, but I have to check into that again. So I can, look at that.
And then the $11,000 or almost $11,500 that's spent on advertising, we pay $10,000, don't we, for the CU tourism or something like that? Right? I mean, can't they visit Champaign or something like that? Shouldn't they be responsible for 3,000 of that? Or I mean, they should be responsible for some of that, right? Don't you think, Diane?
Diane Marlin.
They do promote the Sweet Corn Festival.
But I'm saying, with it being such a major event, we shouldn't have to pay, or, you know, $11,000 for marketing, and we pay $10,000 to an agency to market one of the larger events that we have. That doesn't seem to be very efficient to me. I don't know. That's how I feel about it. I think that it should be a bigger part of their objective to market one of the major events that we have in the city of Urbana. For us to pay them $10,000 and have to pay $11,000 from the event just doesn't seem very efficient to me.
Eric Jacobson.
Well, that discussion prompts me to ask a question, and that is, if we look at an event like this, which is a $300,000 event, and the total marketing expense between the two entities is about $21,000, is that kind of typical for what one would spend for an event like this? Is you know, if you're in contact with other professionals who do this all over the country, does that sound like the right ballpark?
That is, I could look into that statistically, but we also do get quite a bit of in-kind advertising as well. So the radio stations donate a lot of, probably, like Stevie J Broadcasting gave us $23,000 last year in advertising, and Illini Radio Group and WCIA, and a lot of the media will give us a lot of you know, free advertising for sponsorships. So there's a lot more advertising that we're not really paying for that we're getting, you know, benefits from as well. So
Brandon Boyce.
I just want to mention the context for our agreement with Visit Champaign County is that they really focus on audiences that are 50 miles away from Champaign County. So the majority of their marketing is really targeted at demographics that are likely to come visit or stay here. Now, that certainly can and does include major events like the Sweet Corn Festival, but it's kind of a blip or a mention in their broader marketing efforts. And when you think about who comes to the Sweet Corn Festival, well, I'm sure there are some people who will travel that far. The vast majority are probably, in this community and within 50 miles. So it's not really something that we would lean on Visit Champaign County to really help with, but we do appreciate the help that we get. But that $10,000 goes toward types of marketing that are really hard for us to replicate as a small city, but as a region, as a whole community, VCC can aggregate that to put the best face forward for our whole county.
Okay, is there more? Would you like to continue?
No, that was it.
That was it.
Yep, that was it.
Where do the golf carts come from?
Who do they come from?
Yeah.
That one I'm not sure of either. I would have to look into that as well.
Well,
All right, Eric Jacobson.
I hope the level of support is worth hearing all the unsolicited advice.
We had some good ideas today, okay? I do appreciate it.
Does anybody want to make a motion then on this yet?
I move sending to council with recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, Eric. And Bill Brown.
I'm not sure I know what we're voting on. Just the 15,000? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I did put a copy of the previous agreement
Marketing
in there for
agreement.
reference.
Marketing agreement, yeah. Resolution approving and authorizing
Yeah.
the marketing.
It's not really the budget for them, but it's just the agreement that they're going to be conducting this again in 2016. Is there other commentary or questions? Okay. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have one more, and we have a public comment on this one coming up. This is Resolution 2016-02-008R, a resolution declaring an intent to reimburse certain redevelopment project costs. This is the Urbana Central TIF District. Brandon, are you going to lead this one? Okay.
Would you like me to give my comment prior to public comment?
Yeah, and then
Okay.
public comment can come in on that.
Thank you. So in August of 2014, the City Council entered into a contract with PGAV Consulting out of St. Louis. Staff has been working with them for some months. The result of that work is presented before you in this packet, largely in the form of the proposed map for the proposed Urbana Central TIF District, but also in the form of a resolution that would express the city's intent to move forward with the creation of this new TIF district. The goals of the new TIF focus on replacing the expiring TIF 1, including underutilized properties that are currently in TIF 2, including publicly owned properties that are in need of reinvestment, releasing successfully developed properties, and setting a new tax baseline that would redeem approximately $7.7 million in EAV back to all taxing partners. The proposed boundary has been refined since council last saw this, a proposed map in conjunction with the PGAV contract, and that is included in the packet. It was there for your review, and we'll discuss that a little more. This new TIF district would fund economic incentives as well as public improvements in the downtown area through 2040, and it could also be extended another 12 years, assuming state statute remains as it is today. TIF 1, as I mentioned, is set to expire. That will expire naturally at the end of 2016. And portions of TIF 2 would also be removed from the current TIF under this proposal, but the remainder of TIF 2 would continue through 2022, and the remaining TIF 2 would continue to generate increment to repay Boneyard. The Boneyard Creek project cost, Race Street and Broadway Avenue repaving, that was all rolled into one debt issuance, and those payments will continue mostly through the end of the life of TIF 2. If anyone has any questions on the basic function of TIF, I'd be happy to answer those. Please let me know if you have questions. There's a portion of the memo that seeks to address that. The existing TIFs, TIF 1 is really, as you can see on the map, the core of our downtown. It was Urbana's first TIF, one of the earliest TIFs in the state of Illinois, established in 1981, amended in 2004 to be extended 12 years. TIF 2 is the periphery of TIF 1, the greater downtown area. It took effect in 1986 and was extended in 2005. These TIFs have had a catalytic impact on development and business attraction in our downtown, and they're associated with many of the most iconic developments and streetscapes of our downtown area. They've assisted in the rehabilitation of buildings, the attraction of businesses and the expansion of businesses, and also major public works projects. TIF 2, as you can see in the diagram in the memo, has shown more pronounced EAV growth than has TIF 1. Primary reason for that is that TIF 1 contains many existing properties, many of which are historic, and generally rehabs of existing buildings produce less equalized assessed value increment compared to a new construction project of the same amount. TIF 2 also just simply contains more new construction projects than TIF 1 does, and that's a large underlying factor in those EAV growth patterns. So the new TIF generally tries to avoid those areas that have been newly constructed upon in favor of finding areas that are better suited for reinvestment. Over the last 10 years, TIF 1 has contributed to multiple major projects. The Stratford apartment building was really the major new construction that has occurred in the core of our downtown in the last 10 years. It also has been the model for the conversation we've been having about the 200 Vine redevelopment site as a market rate housing project focused not on students but on residents, young professionals, young families, empty nesters, and a good cross-section of our community. TIF 1 also was instrumental in the renovation of 206 through 210 West Main by Cake Design Development. That's a cafeteria company, CoLab, the two tech offices upstairs, as well as an upper-story apartment. The outdoor beer garden that's still, well, I guess it'll have its first full season here this spring at 204 West Main, and then the redevelopment of the Landmark Hotel, which did result in substantial improvements to the facility and the addition of a portico share, but because that project was not fully completed by the developer as envisioned, $1 million of those incentives were returned to the TIFs. TIF 1 was also responsible for the full reconstruction of Main Street that happened over the last, I think it was about 2 years ago. And historically, TIF 1 is why we have a parking deck downtown. It's why Jumers was expanded. And much of the streetscape that we associate with the feel of our downtown was in part funded by the downtown TIFs. TIF 2, in regard to recent new construction, Gateway Shops, it has been a major addition to equalized assessed value, and it continues to be actively redeveloped. We expect that to continue strongly and to be a major contributor to TIF 2's ability to repay bonds for public improvements. Patel Law Office on University Avenue, two ongoing agreements at 129 North Race and Broadway Market, as well as site prep at the Alan Strong's property on Race and the corner of University and Race. Recent public improvements, of course, include the Boneyard Creek redevelopment area and then the repaving and streetscape improvements to Race Street and Broadway Avenues. Historically, TIF 2 is probably best known for the major contribution to the relocation of O'Brien. Of course, TIF 4 is central to that, changing the character of the intersection of University and North Cunningham, and also then allowing for the creation of the Five Points Commerce Center, Walgreens, Urbana Crossing and Schnucks to the south, Lincoln Square Village renovations, and also downtown streetscape enhancements. So in many ways, the story of our downtown and how we know it today and the major projects and businesses we like to frequent there are very much related to the kinds of projects that TIF has funded, but also that the city has been able to influence the outcome of projects through the use of these incentive funds to better mirror our community plans and city goals. So with the pending expirations of TIF 1 and 2, the city is faced with having no robust tools to help achieve its future planned goals. The proposed boundary has, again, been created through study with city staff, PGAV, and also a good amount of input from our taxing partners, including the school district and the park district and the county and several others. The proposed boundary intends to, again, include those most developable sites, to exclude residential, because the goal is not to create a residential TIF, and we want to avoid the need for a housing study, and also to exclude any of those high-performing sites that I mentioned before. When you look at the boundary, you'll see that there's been a recent change since that was last shown to council. The biggest change is that there's a large addition of land to the north, predominantly through Crystal Lake Park. And the purpose of adding that was at the request of the Park District, because they know that's a public amenity that will need additional investment in the future. But adding it also allowed us to reach other sites that are potential redevelopment sites or reinvestment sites, and those include the event parking lot immediately north of Gateway Shops. That's a Park District-owned site. And then the Washington School, the former Washington School, there at the northern terminus of this proposed TIF area. That was has just very recently been discussed by the school board as a area that is in need of reinvestment or redevelopment, and they don't necessarily have a firm idea as to how they want to proceed, but a TIF district would give them a number of potential options, and that they've been supportive of that inclusion. Also in the TIF are other sites of similar character. These were included prior, but are worth mentioning: the County Sheriff's Office and Downtown Jail, also subject of much discussion of its future use. The School District's Administration Building, Leal Park, which is actually undergoing a major renovation at this time, the Urbana Free Library campus and adjacent properties that could be considered for expansion of that campus, as well as many sites suitable for downtown transit facility. I do need to point out that despite what the memo says, the Urbana City Building is not in the TIF district, so that was an error in my writing of the memo. In theory, the city building could be included. However, because it really isn't a active redevelopment sort of a site, that really isn't necessary to include. The proposed area also includes major RFP sites, including the 200 Vine block immediately north of City Hall and North Crane Alley, as well as multiple other sites that have been contemplated either in the downtown plan or other deliberations as redevelopment sites in Urbana. Overall, this TIF would, the Urbana Central TIF would, as proposed, would return approximately $7.7 million in EAV to the tax rolls, including for the city as well as all other taxing partners. It would still meet the debt obligation that needs to be paid for the Boneyard, Broadway, and Race bond issuance through the remainder of TIF 2. It would enable major projects, including specifically a proposed $30 million mixed-use development at 200 Vine by TWG Development out of Indianapolis, who we've been working with for some time. A new downtown TIF would be vital in the implementation of the 2012 Downtown Plan, the 2008 Boneyard Creek Master Plan, the 2010 Signage and Wayfinding Study, the 2014 Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District and City Intergovernmental Agreement, as well as present City Council and Mayor goals. I should note that all of those plans I just listed were created since Urbana's last major action regarding TIF, which were the 2004 and 2005 extensions of TIF 1 and 2. So again, the prospect of not having a tool to achieve those goals would create many challenges to move forward. And these plans would be specifically taken into consideration in the formulation of a redevelopment plan for this area. And so again, the resolution before council that you're being asked to consider tonight is merely an expression of the city's intent to create a new TIF district within the proposed boundary. If approved, staff would work with PGAV, our consultant, to complete research, create a draft redevelopment plan, and initiate the public noticing and commenting processes that are required to create the TIF. This process would take at least 4 months, meaning that we would not be in a position to create a new TIF, or the council would not be in a position to take final action until July of 2016. And I think that concludes my comments. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Yeah, we'll take some questions, and we'll have public commentary. Bill Brown.
Yeah, do you know what the EAV is of the new TIF boundaries is drawn?
It's approximately, well, that's I guess I'm not sure what you mean by that question. What would be the EAV, the base value EAV of TIF, of the new TIF?
Yeah.
I do not know that, but the base value does remain on the tax rolls, so that is not something we focus on in this kind of analysis.
Yeah,
but I could find it out.
I guess it represents a percentage of our total EAV. So when you're thinking about how much taxing authority is being taken out of basically the mainstream, it'd be nice to know whether it's 5%, 10%. You know. So I'd like to know that by next week, I guess.
Sure, but just to be clear, the base EAV is not taken out. The base EAV remains in the main taxing pool.
Okay, I see what you mean. But it's the increase from that base would still be useful, I think. I mean, knowing if it started out at 5% and we're growing at 20% a year, then you can figure out how much you're losing that way.
Sure.
And then as far as the new TIF redevelopment plan goes, I don't think I've seen a TIF redevelopment plan from our existing TIFs. Do they exist?
Yeah, they're on our website as well.
I've looked for them. Could you point them out, send us a link or something?
I can send you a link, yeah.
I did find the ones in Champaign, but I've never, and so these are the ones that were developed when the TIF was created. They may be scanned typewriter images or something, right?
Most of them are, I mean, generally with the older TIFs, we're referring to the extension documents that are updated, but we do have the typewriter versions for the original TIF plans as well.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it'd be good to see those. Thanks.
All right. Let's have then public comment, and that would be Darrell Cruz. You want to come forward at this time?
My comments are written for you to follow along. They likely are about 7 minutes rather than 5 minutes. If we get to that point, if the City Council is interested in extending, it would be appreciated. Tonight, the Urbana City Council will vote officially declaring its intention to establish a redevelopment district. So says the News Gazette headline today. This is troubling on a number of levels. How can the city can commit to a new TIF prior to completing a full eligibility study, conducting review and EAV projections, determining the financial impact on other taxing bodies, identifying specific outcomes, holding public hearings, and considering other alternatives to TIF to incentivize economic development? Devoid of these steps, it seems extremely premature to vote for this resolution, unless, of course, these other steps are really irrelevant to the council's final decision. In 1981, the city has since 1981, the city has collected over $33 million in TIF 1 and 2. 85% of this money, $28 million, was taken from the property tax rolls of the school district, the park district, and 6 other taxing bodies. That average is close to $1 million a year. The city is used for infrastructure and business incentive programs. Yes, some of this money was used for park and school district projects, but nowhere near the monies kept and used by the city. Why hasn't this been enough? What will ever be enough? Downtown Urbana in 1981 and 2016 are two completely different places. Re-energized and revitalized are terms repeatedly used to characterize downtown today by staff and the mayor. Blight, as defined by TIF, has been greatly eradicated, but the city still wants more. A new downtown TIF would extend a TIF in this area to 58 years. Although the city cites input from the TIF Joint Review Board, it does not necessarily imply implicit support. Members do not have veto power over the city. In 2014, the Illinois Association of School Boards passed a resolution at their state convention supporting changes in the TIF Act to prevent extending the life of TIFs beyond 23 years. This action is worth noting. The city has collected over $17.4 million of Urbana School District 16 property tax dollars from TIF 1 and 2. Based on the meager EAV growth of TIF 1 and 2, has the council asked or done a study to determine how long it might take the school district to recover this money? In fact, the school district will likely never recover the full amount in adjusted dollars. Yet that was how this funding mechanism was justified and sold to the public. As documented by staff in the report you just heard, TIF 1 and 2 EAV have not grown as anticipated. For reasons explained in the staff memo, they likely never will. So why is the city pursuing a new downtown TIF? The memo states there are several private and public projects that need to be addressed. Of course, that line of logic will always be true and used to justify a downtown TIF. But after 35 years, there's more than city staff recommendations to be considered. Objectivity, data analysis, caution, and a deeper reflection of TIF effectiveness and impact are warranted. There are some fundamental questions the City Council should be asking of staff before committing or making an intent to a new downtown TIF. One, why isn't staff using inflation-adjusted dollars when doing cross-year data analysis so we are comparing apples to apples? For example, in the paper today, in TIF 1, the EAV in 1980 was $4 million. If you throw in a CIP, it raised it up to 2014 to be supposed to be $11.5 million, yet currently it's only $9 million. So it's actually gone down over the course of the 35 years. Two, when terminated, will TIF have proven to be financially beneficial to all taxing bodies, not just the city? Will the increased EAV allow them to quickly recapture their lost taxes? If not, is the city justified in taking their taxes again?
Move for more time.
I'll give you 2 more minutes there.
Thank you. Should TIF monies be used for public buildings, for example, the MT Terminal building, which has been mentioned, that do not contribute to EAV growth? I see that as using school money to build a bus terminal. Would you go to the school board and ask them, give me $30,000 to build a bus terminal instead of using it for school supplies or a teacher's aid? Should taxpayers' money be used to incentivize risky economic developments that the private market investors will not fully fund? Is this an appropriate investment risk for tax money? How much taxpayers' money has been lost from poor economic investments in the last 35 years? Successes are highlighted. Failures are untold. Be honest with the public. 5, when should or will the city allow the forces of the free market to operate uninhibited within the downtown again? When should or will the city allow the 8 public taxing bodies to collect their rightful taxes unimpeded again? After 35 years, has the city simply become hopelessly dependent on other agencies' tax money and so myopic that it can't see any solution or alternative approach to TIF? With the city's current rationale, there will always be a need for a downtown TIF, whether it raises the EAV or not. Without a TIF, it claims it has no tools to incentivize economic development. That is simply false. You have many. You have a new downtown infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, lighting, and signage. You have a revitalized and vibrant downtown business district. You have TIF 2 monies for 6 more years. You potentially have significant revenue coming from Carl and Pravina properties. You have an active UAB and city marketing efforts. The option of using the city's portion only of TIF 1 and 2 monies, over $250,000 annually could be used for local incentives. An opportunity to review fees, ordinances that adversely affect business growth and development could occur. TIF isn't the only answer to downtown growth. It's time the city realizes it. Maybe a 5-year moratorium of TIF 1 until the expiration of TIF 2 would help the city and community to better assess and analyze its options more honestly and effectively before adopting another new downtown TIF.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl. All right, I think we could have general conversation, and there can also be a motion made. Bill Brown.
I'll just try to I agree with a lot of what Daryl says. I think some of it is a little oversimplified, like as far as the reduction in inflation-adjusted values. It's true, but when you look at the purpose of the original TIF 1 was to build a parking garage, and that parking garage has 0 value, taxing value, but it does benefit neighboring businesses. It's probably increased some sales tax. So there's, I think it's a little bit more complicated than just looking at the assessed value within the boundaries and how it's changed, because I think, well, and then the courthouse took over half a block that was privately taxed before. So there's some things, and it was a pretty small district to begin with. Actually, the courthouse, I guess, was in TIF 2. But there's a couple things like that. I guess you have to have some kind of tools to address the aging infrastructure. And I understand how, taking some of this increased valuation seems to be taken from the schools, but we also give back to the schools, at least in the former incarnation of, I guess the current incarnation of TIF 2. I can't keep track of them all. It's in some incarnation of TIF 2, we're giving some money, I think $200,000 a year back to the school district, which is a pretty substantial amount. I think it may be half or close to half of what their portion was. We've done projects for the Park District. We've added to King Park through a different TIF. So I think you have to take all that into consideration. That's what makes it really hard to analyze. So I guess in my view, what I'm looking for is a solid plan to see, what our strategies are. I know we have these various redevelopment incentives that are good for all the TIFs, I think. They're all pretty similar for all the TIFs, but I want to take a look at the specific plans and see how they differ from TIF to TIF and what the specific goals are for each TIF, and just kind of use those as we evaluate each project and see if they're, if they're within the plans, and also try and be consistent on from project to project what percentage we can reimburse, depending on, I know there's variables there too, how much infrastructure needs to be worked on and things like that. So I'm not thrilled about TIF, but I think it's not a bad tool to use, so I'm going to support this.
Charlie?
Okay, I guess the one of the important factors for me is the participation of our major taxing bodies with us in doing this, their recognition of the value of this, in that they have properties in here as well. So they see value in what we're doing. And I think as long as we keep cooperating with them, they understand the long-term benefits of redevelopment, new development. So I think as long as we have their support as we go forward, we're not cramming anything down anybody's throat.
Mayor Pressing, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say what Charlie just said. The school district and the park district and our other partners in this seem to be very appreciative of the fact that the city has had TIFs, and they're willing to back more TIFs. So I think that's a really strong endorsement.
Yes, Eric.
So I think it's not a fair criticism to say that the city is, which is implicit in what Darrell said, that that we regard TIF as the only answer to downtown growth. We use a lot of tools for downtown growth. And it is true that TIF can be abused and has been abused in other communities. It's been abused to provide favors to well-connected developers. It's been used to drive people out of affordable housing for gentrification. But that's not what we have done. And that's not what I project us to do. What I see us doing is what I have seen us do and what I see us projected to do are targeted, using TIF for targeted developments that will make a more vibrant community and increase our assessed evaluation. So I will support this resolution.
Yes, Diane Marlin.
Well, I also looked for the redevelopment plans for the current TIFs, and I couldn't find them either. So I'm looking forward to the next one, and I'm curious how those redevelopment plans are created. Who does them?
Do you want to comment on that at all, CD?
Yeah, I think Libby could speak better to that, having overseen multiple of these actions.
On our 4 TIFs that we've had, there's been a combination of city staff and consultants who've worked on the plans. There's a set format, usually with the redevelopment plans. There's a lot of data that goes into establishing the TIF. We've worked cooperatively with PGAV on last several TIF efforts, and they do a lot of the analysis, but then a lot of the plan writing staff will do, and we'll split the effort in this case as well. You know, they do vary. There's the 1980 vintage downtown TIF, and there's some nice illustrations in there, and then there was a good analysis in 2004 when we amended the 2 TIFs, so we have those documents. TIF 3 was a whole other type of TIF in North Urbana, and of course that's now expired. TIF 4 was our most recent TIF, and that has a huge plan, which I wrote a lot of when I was earlier days at the city. So there's a structure in doing the plan and adopting the TIF. There's several steps. It's all mandated in the statute and the Redevelopment Act, so we'll follow along with those. Folks at PGAV are so very expert in doing the TIF planning that they'll be assisting us, and they do a parcel-by-parcel analysis of the eligibility, and there's a lot of factors that go into whether TIF is eligible. We will look, I believe, quite a bit to our downtown plan, which is a very extensive planning effort that we undertook not too long ago in 2012 to inform this redevelopment plan.
Well, I was thinking going forward, one thing I'd like to see is an occasional, maybe it's annually, comparing our progress in these TIF districts against what the plan, what's in the plan, so we can kind of keep an eye on how these things, how effective these things are. And the other thing that I would love, which I don't think we have, or at least it's not available to the council, is any kind of criteria or policies or guidelines for evaluating how to use TIF money when any particular project comes up. And, you know, there's different ways to invest TIF money or use TIF money, and it could be a front-loaded incentive, it could be a pay-as-you-go incentive, and there's just nothing there for us to use in making decisions. And if it's out there, I would like it to be available.
It's really a whole field. Use of TIF funds, and there's an organization called ITIA that we're members of. They have 2 meetings. It's just in Illinois, the way TIF is practiced in Illinois. 2 meetings a year. Our staff attend both of those meetings. It's a full conference. Our TIF attorneys also were there. And so it's an evolving practice. There is full-time staff person at ITIA who works with municipalities. So there's a bit of an industry in the practice, and so it's constantly evolving for best practices. So that is what we learn and bring back to our city council.
Is there a manual, like a best practices manual?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of documentation. The Redevelopment Act is really, really very, very detailed and very much like a cookbook on how to establish TIFs. And I've not been to a TIF conference since I kind of moved up the ranks a bit, so Brandon might want to talk about the types of resources that are available to us more currently.
So Brandon, do you want to do that at this time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, primarily ITIA has been the best resource, as a place to interact with other TIF administrators throughout the state, as well as attorneys and consultants. And I mean, we generally hear a lot of different presentations on how projects are conducted. I mean, there's always a difference in needs and practice as well, especially within Cook County. It can be kind of a very different world when you listen to the details and the complexity of some of those projects. But they always hold one in Chicago, and then the latter conference of the year is held downstate. And so there's a good balance in the association to share stories from around the state of how they're used. But the thing I'm most often struck by is that you know, communities utilize these incentives for the goals they prioritize, and you know, no matter what that redevelopment plan says per se, if your council at the time doesn't agree with that action, as you know, may have been described in the original plan, it doesn't proceed. So the activities of the TIF are regularly tested through public scrutiny and approval as well. And I think maybe if our councils were only concerned with EAV growth, then maybe we'd see TIF districts that focused only on things like EAV growth. But generally, these plans include a broad variety of goals, and meeting them is, you know, the utilization of this tool is just as broad and scope often as the kinds of things you see in a downtown plan that isn't specific to TIF in that sense. So oftentimes the way these inquiries get approached is you start with the question of what goal are you trying to achieve, and then what follows is, well, what methods could you use to allow TIF or other tools to achieve those community-based goals. So, you know, in terms of there being a boilerplate practice for how you use TIF, it really depends more on what goals are you setting forth in your community and within your TIF district.
I would just add, if I might, that we do have annual reporting, and we have, you know, at least that annual TIF Joint Review Board meeting. We have a very good Joint Review Board. A lot of the people have been involved in the TIF efforts for a number of years, and those are about 2 inches thick, the annual reports, but has all the numbers, and that's also a time opportunity to go back to the plan and see, are we achieving what we set out to do. And I've looked at the older downtown TIF plans, and I think that we've accomplished really quite a great deal of the vision from the 80s, started in the 80s. TIF 4 along Cunningham is a little different because it had such an emphasis on the park facilities along that corridor and along the commercial corridors. And then in the North Urbana, the TIF 3 plan was focused on specific projects which were really achieved. I mean, we completed the redevelopment of just about all the prospective locations that we anticipated. The Lincoln Mobile Home Park was redeveloped with the Eats at Lincoln, the Hampton Inn, the Durst Bicycle Building, the Provena Medical Office Building. Those were all envisioned in that TIF and succeeded in that TIF.
I just had one other question.
Okay. Take it away.
It always pops into my mind every time we talk about TIF, but I'm just curious what the city's overall EAV growth has been in this period compared to what we're seeing in the TIFs. Is there a way to get that information?
Yes, we can present that. We do have that analysis, and I can't recall entirely off the top of my head. I mean, TIF 1 has performed below the trend of the citywide EAV, and then I think TIF 4 and TIF 2 have performed above, or at least, towards the end of their lives. And TIFs become, they tend to sort of accelerate their EAV growth, especially if you have major projects that occur. And TIF 4, like TIF 2, has new construction sites, like mainly O'Brien's there. But we can do that.
Okay.
We can provide that in more detail.
Thank you.
Then Aaron, and then Charlie.
I've been trying to understand and working on understanding TIF ever since coming on the council, and there's still a lot to learn about this, and I was even in conversations today with some of the staff and the mayor about trying to understand TIF. But most of it is presented as what the benefits are, and I don't hear a lot about the analysis of exactly how much has been created or how much has been generated, the EAV growth and all that type of stuff. We just hear a lot about it's almost like I get 75% of what it's supposed to do, but I don't really get the back end of what it has actually generated and created. And trying to understand TIF just a few moments ago upstairs, having a conversation about how the money is generated, I don't think I have a very clear understanding of how it affects other taxing bodies. And so given some of the concerns that we have, especially that I've talked to with other school board members and folks at Urbana, wanting a program or a way to teach the trades to our youth and stuff like that, and then we say they don't have the money for it, So I'm increasingly concerned about some of this, because I haven't heard from some of these school board members, or as Mayor Pressing said, some of the superintendents or whoever, and to see exactly where they are with a proposed shorter term, if possible, in the TIF. Are all TIFs 23 years? Is that just how they work? Or can they be structured in a way that we set the number of years on them? I'm certainly intrigued by what staff has said to me about the possibilities of increasing a more vibrant downtown. But I haven't heard from very many of the community members. I don't think most people even understand what the world of TIF is, right? So I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and yet we're moving forward with these plans to do different things. So I'm not sure. I'm pretty confident that most of the folks that I represent do not have a full understanding of what a TIF district even is, right? Of course, I raised the issue of affordable housing, not too long ago in some meetings with the staff, and I don't understand why, for instance, a TIF district would be downtown and then TIF 2 would be just surrounding that. It just seems to be the way that it's drawn seems to have a particular focus, which is probably what they're supposed to do, but to draw it, TIF 1 being sort of the tip of this microphone and then TIF 2 around it, why isn't it broken up in a different fashion? I mean, I just have some questions about how it actually works. And hearing some of the concerns that have been raised, I have heard concerns much like what Eric proposed or said, that sometimes it's just for developers, right? I don't think that's what we are trying to do here in Champaign, but I think TIF is ultimately going to be designed that way if we don't have blight. I mean, where's the blight that we're addressing? right? When I did read a little bit about it, TIF, blight to me was like almost what we're using Habitat for Humanity for, but it's not being used in that way. TIF money doesn't seem to be being used like that, right? So, I mean, I do have a lot of concerns about it. Everyone knows that I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. And with some of the things that have been raised, I do think we should talk to the public. I do think that we should talk to the other partners and be very clear about how they feel about it, you know, so.
Brandon, I was wondering if you could answer two questions that have just come up. One of them is how we engage other partners to agree to certain activity in the TIF district. And the second one is, can programs use TIF money, or is it capital improvements? Can you use TIF money to start a new program, like a social program or educational program?
So the uses of TIF are well defined by statute in terms of eligible reimbursements, and they're primarily things that are related to capital improvements. It can be rehabilitation of existing public facilities or public infrastructure, but generally programmatic uses, with some few exceptions, are not allowed. And you can create a TIF district to do residential work, which TIF 3 had a focus in a residential neighborhood. It was created as a residential TIF. But if you don't really set that out from the onset, then you can't really change the purpose of TIF later in its life. So it's not that TIF can't be used for those kinds of purposes. It's just it's an inflexible tool. You know, it's most commonly used in central business districts or business districts in general for commercial redevelopment, and then accompanying public improvements. That's what you see most often. But there are examples of positive uses of TIF to achieve residential goals as well. But when you look at the spectrum of other tools that are out there, and this extends into our grants management division, and certainly Libby Tyler knows more about this than I do, but there are a variety of other tools and funding sources out there that are better suited for social services or residential applications. One of the programmatic areas that is an exception to the use of TIF is vocational training, and that's something we've provided funding to our school district for in the past, and that's certainly something we could look at in the future. And then to address your other question, we engage our taxing partners, well, informally on a pretty regular basis, but we engage them formally through the Joint Review Board meetings once a year. And at those meetings, we report to them on all the activities that we've engaged in within the TIF in the last year, and seek their input as well.
Dennis? Yes, so we did raise this at their last meeting with the Joint Review Board in December, and have they asked for preliminary copies of the maps, and we have informal indications of support. But this would be to start the process that you're talking about, the investigation. The large report that I talked about that PGAV would help to prepare rates all the properties on criteria for blight, as well as a lesser criteria, which is called a conservation area. And another factor in whether an area is even eligible for TIF would be declining EAV over a period of time. So I think that's part of the reason why it has the configuration that you've seen. And again, we started with 2 TIFs in the downtown, so that's why we kind of have the original TIF 1, which will be going away, and then kind of the donut around the donut hole is a TIF 2. We are surgically reconfiguring the downtown TIF so that we can maximize the immediate return back to the taxing districts, including the city, for the increment that has been gained over the years since TIF was established. So that will come back to us next year, starting next year with TIF 1. We are retaining within the proposed TIF the underperforming properties that still meet the TIF criteria. And that's why that it has that unusual configuration It also, as Brandon described, includes properties that have been requested by our taxing partners that we include. And again, these all have to meet the criteria in the state law. Another key factor in TIF is the but-for test, that we are looking for developments and improvements that but-for TIF could not occur. That left just up to the private sector would not occur. There's a question about, can you do programs? Yes, we've done programs, economic development programs that benefit our TIF, certainly very much in the downtown. Some of our arts activities, years ago, a little more in the farmers marketing, although we're moving away from that and making that more related. We support our business association. We do a lot of programmatic things to keep our downtown vital. Brandon also mentioned the vocational training funds. Those come out of TIF. Those are expressly allowed in the TIF Act, and those are used at the discretion of the school district, how they use that. We have helped with the Park District on a number of improvements for their properties, and we would look to be, in this TIF, working closely with the school district on redevelopment of their site on Race Street, which is really a problematic location for them in terms of functioning as a good administrative office. So we would be partners with them and seeking alternatives. So that could be redeveloped into something that is a more higher and better use, and the TIF would allow that to happen, which just left to the private market, would not otherwise. A Boneyard Park is a great example of a type of improvement that could not have happened without the TIF, and then we're just beginning to see the benefits of that having occurred. So I think that there's some great basic information on TIF for those who are new that we can provide. It is complicated. They, take a whole class on TIFs and do these conferences. It is a whole field. So, we'd be really happy to provide additional information, and this will be a several months long process, so we'll have a lot of other steps. But again, we do need to follow the state law, which is really is a cookbook, and this is what, the steps that they ask you to undertake.
We'll also have our consultant up during that time who can answer many detailed questions and give examples from other communities as well.
So several things come to mind. One is, from a time frame perspective, we formulating this TIF district, we do have some, it sounds like from prior conversations, we do have a need to establish this and get things going, right? But there's still, July was the soonest that we could establish something like this, right? So we do have time to have some public input to talk to our other partners and things like that, right?
We would do it, and it's required.
Okay. And from one of the reasons why this becomes increasingly troublesome to me, because some of the reading that I've done around these TIF districts and stuff, when we start talking about developers and the income inequality and all those different issues that we know exist, the individuals who do benefit personally from TIF districts or these incentives and tax rebates, they don't tend to look like me, okay? In many situations, from what I have seen locally, the individuals who are the major players here locally, who are developers and stuff like that. But the other component to that is that what I look at is the development for downtown. We have seen something like Lord and Lacey is downtown now, right? And I think that is something that is specifically something from an African-American cultural standpoint, right? But for the most part, the cultural differences that we experience living in Champaign-Urbana, even at the Sweet Corn Fest, I absolutely love going to the Sweet Corn Fest, but I don't watch any of the acts, okay? They could be nationally known to Eric. I don't know who they are. They don't resonate with me and with the group of people that I represent. Bars and stuff, I don't bar hop, right? I don't think that's something that we do in the African-American community. affordable housing is something that I'm raising as an issue around the TIF districts. So I can just point to repeatedly how I don't see, even in this vocational training, all of the work that I want to do or have been trying to do in the community to get more African American and people of color in the trades, I don't see a program being rolled out or pushed forward by staff or to say, listen, we want to take this TIF money to create this particular program and work with 116 or something like that. So I'd just like to see those particular things interwoven into the proposals so that we can see how all communities will benefit from a TIF if we're going to proceed in that manner. But I just don't see how my community that I'm representing benefits from this. As a whole, if the city of Urbana grows, I can understand that, but it should be that way for everyone who participates and as a taxpayer in the city of Urbana. So, I mean, the goals even, I'm sorry, that's one other point. We talk about the minority business enterprises, women business enterprises, the millions and millions of dollars that are going to be generated by this. I don't see goals put forth that are going to help generate opportunities for people of color or African Americans to work on these projects or to their businesses, to contracts to be in part of it. So it does turn out to be exactly what Eric was talking about in the long run. It turns out to be that maybe there's no specific intent, but the result is the same.
Well, both the mayor and Libby would like to respond. So, Mayor, do you want to respond first, and then Libby can answer?
I want to say to Aaron that I'm also very supportive of having the trades education be in the high school. And we have given money to the schools, but they said they couldn't find instructors. So I think that was what the hang-up is. But, you know, this process that we're going through to set up these things, we can put our goals in it. We're just starting the process and saying we want to create one. And so if we have concerns, let's work with the school district and say, let's, you know, have a search for instructors so that we can reinstitute that program, because that's been very helpful to people. When they used to build a house, for example, a lot of people went and, you know, that became their career. So I think it's an important thing that we should work with the schools on. But, you know, up until now, they've been happy. And I think we distributed, was it $13 million when one of those TIFs closed? And most of it went to the schools. So that benefits the entire community. But anyway, I agree with you that we need specific goals.
Okay, and Libby, did you want to make a comment then on?
Yeah, I was
further
going to say the
comments?
planning process, of course, would include goal setting, and didn't mention earlier, but a lot of the TIF benefits come in the form of programs that benefit small businesses, including Lord & Lacey's small business enterprise, the fit-out costs of their restaurant. So they're a very good example of a local business that has benefited from our TIF. You know, the TIF 3 is completed, but it very demonstrably benefited, you know, the portion of North Urbana in which it's located, introduced businesses, restaurants, and a very fine subdivision where people have affordable homes. Now, of course, the law's changed since we did that TIF. It's not so easy to do the housing component, but we were able to do so at that time. It was an extremely successful TIF, so much so that when it was complete, we were able to, after sorting through some different issues, we were able to bring back to the city and the taxing body substantial funds. So there's a lot of potential to benefit all kinds of programs and ideas with the TIF.
And is it true also, Libby, that startup grants to businesses are part of the program, and it can be any business from any economic group, any cultural group, any ethnic group who wants to start, any aged entrepreneur receives $1,000 after they've completed a small business training course and have a business plan filed with you in your department. they're eligible then to receive a startup funding for 1 year.
Yeah.
Right, and that's also one of the things that we do. And any group or person or businessman can do that and ask for that assistance.
Yeah. So,
Yes, Eric.
so I think TIFs can be used for many things, and I think that, I think we just need to write into our plan that they're going to be for, that this includes affordable housing, that we're not after completely maximizing EAV growth, that we're going to do some social goals. There's an African grocery store on Grigg Street in my ward, and the gentleman who owns that would like to develop a restaurant attached to it. So this is a prime example of something that might be enabled to happen with TIF, but yeah, let's be very purposeful on that what happens with the TIF reflects our values as a community.
All right. Charlie.
Yeah, at the end of my comment, I think I'll make a motion too, though. Once upon a time, with a previous finance director, but I think Brandon was around, I think we, as a group, requested a full-blown analysis of the TIFs, a comparison, and I know that work got started. There have been some staff changes and whatnot, but I hope that comes to us sooner than later. Just try to get that back going again. I know it was requested of a previous finance director, and hopefully now the numbers are in place. With that, I'd like to keep this. This is a beginning step, so I'll move this into this council with recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Charlie. Does anybody like to second that?
I will second that. I think that with all the caveats that have been made here about the TIF, we have, I think, a potential project of undeniable merit that, and I think we should not, I think we should, lay all of these other things on the TIF in parallel with moving the creation of the district forward.
Other comments? Yes, Michael.
So, Olivia, I have a couple, maybe geographical or logistical, that's probably not, geographical questions. So the existing TIF 2 would be rendered non-contiguous by the proposed redevelopment project area, according to the map. So is that within state law? Is that, it must be, because we have a highly paid consultant drawing this thing. But can you explain how that works?
I can't explain how it works.
It's totally non-contiguous in multiple points.
I can't explain how it works from a legal perspective, but we did run this by our TIF attorney as well. The basis for this is that a lot of the early, as Libby described, the practice of TIF administration has changed. And the early TIFs were all large area TIFs. And what you have is you have a number in many communities, because almost every major metropolitan area in Illinois has TIF districts as well. They'll have these large aging TIFs, and then they'll have a new project come along and they need to incentivize it. So the process of de-TIFing is a newer sort of activity that wasn't envisioned originally. So they de-TIF a portion of an older TIF and they re-TIF within that. So this is our first time having to do this. It's been done many times in Peoria, for example, and actually my understanding is downtown Champaign is actively considering this process as well for a new RFP site. And that this is one of those consequences of the de-TIFing process, and it has not been challenged. Our consultant has given us examples of instances in which communities have utilized this kind of a process in questionable ways that are not considered best practice. We're doing this in a very straightforward fashion that our consultant is comfortable with and our TIF attorney had no issue with.
Okay, well, I guess if it plays in Peoria, it'll play here, huh? So then with regard to the Park District, I note that a vast majority of Crystal Lake Park is encompassed in this new proposed redevelopment project area, or the new TIF. Is that basically with the goal of getting to the Washington School? I mean, is there actually some kind of desire on the Park District's part to redevelop any part of Crystal Lake Park other than the parcel that's directly north of the Five Points development?
No, I don't believe the Park District has any intent of redeveloping. However, public reinvestment in public amenities such as parks can be included, especially for facilities or infrastructure. And so when you look at TIF 4, its shape and its redevelopment plan, using TIF to benefit the park was a really specific goal. This is not truly the focus of this TIF, but yeah, one goal was to reach Washington School, which is a potential redevelopment site, but being inclusive of the park preserves that option.
May I add, the Park District does have a master plan that is their major project right now to make improvements to Crystal Lake Park, because it is an older park, it's showing its age. So there are a lot of improvements, say to the walkway system and to the lake itself. It's time to dredge again the lake. So they do have an ambitious master plan for Crystal Lake to kind of bring back its glory. We're not saying that these will be TIF-funded activities, but it's possible that we may find some activities that the TIF could participate in, and I think that was another reason why the Park District was interested in having at least a portion of the park contained. The parcels, there are actually a number of parcels that make up Crystal Lake Park, and they're very large parcels, so we didn't really want to split parcels. We excluded, of course, the newer developed Outdoor Aquatic Center, since that actually wouldn't be eligible for inclusion in the TIF. So that's why we stopped it there. And again, it creates a bridge to the Washington School site.
Okay. And I just wanted to say that I certainly appreciated many of Darrell Cruz's comments, and frankly share some of his concerns. You know, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need TIFs. We would grow organically. We would have businesses that would want to come in and invest and not have their hand out for a government subsidy, which is absolutely what this is, in order to complete their projects. But you know, we have an extremely reputable firm in TWG coming in to redevelop a vacant space, something that's generating $0 of tax revenue for any taxing district. So there is also benefit to a TIF. I do think that we shouldn't be underplaying the significance of the metric of EAV. It's absolutely an essential argument at the core of TIF advocates, and these two TIFs have not performed in terms of EAV. They absolutely have not. We can talk about TIF 1 and the parking garage and the reworking of Main Street, but you know, people could logically argue that those things should have spurred additional development, which should have absolutely increased the EAV. But in terms of time value of money, TIF 1 has lost EAV. To the tune of, well, it was $4 million in 1980, $9 million in 2016, but the Consumer Price Index would have priced that out at $12.3 million in 2016. So you know, a TIF, some can logically argue that we're treading water with a TIF. And maybe not even treading water. TIF 2, 1986, $10 million EAV. 2016, $23 million EAV. Time value of money would have put it at 21.6. So we're just barely over with a whole lot of work, a whole lot of reallocation of tax dollars, barely growing EAV. So I don't think the EAV argument should be dismissed or set aside or diminished. It's a very important part of the whole concept of TIF. That's what you go to the other taxing bodies and say, hey, we're going to grow the EAV. If we do this now, down the road, we're all going to be better off because we're going to have more taxes. It's not panning out that way. This is not to diminish anybody's efforts. This is not to say that I'm not going to ultimately support this new reworking of the TIF. I'm very interested in the TWG project. I'm not necessarily going to be quite as enthusiastic about a couple others that are maybe coming down the road. But I do appreciate everyone's work on this, and I just wanted to point out those couple of things.
Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for all of your work on this, and I think it is a fairly conservative TIF as far as size goes. It's reducing the TIF 1 and TIF 2 quite a bit. So if you're going to do the calculation for what the base EAV of the new TIF would be, I wonder if at the same time you could give us an idea of how much the assessed valuation of TIF 2 that will be going back to the taxpayers 4 years from now currently is worth. The part that will be expiring in 4 years, because that's pretty significant with 5 Points and Chinooks and some of the other larger projects. And that will be given back in 4 years, assuming we aren't coming up with another proposal that I haven't heard of yet.
All right, so I could say some things, but I won't. I'll save it for next week. We have a motion, we have a second. I'm going to just call it and say, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Goes to the City Council. All right, let's go to the last items here. Resolution number 2016-02-009R, a resolution in support of a sustainable 9/11 funding. Mayor Pressing.
Okay, we worked with other communities on the Muhammad Aquifer protection, and I think it was a very effective coalition. So we have a number of problems that other communities have as well. And one of them is, how do we have a sustainable funding for 911 systems? And so what I'm trying to do here is address a couple of statewide problems that we could work with other communities. I think Champaign would be interested possibly in supporting these things. So I'm bringing you one to support sustainable 911 funding. I think you've heard me talk about this before, so I'll just say that this is just to have some document that we can take to other governments so that we can work together and try to get the attention of the legislature to get a better system for funding.
All right, is there comments or motion? Charlie Smythe.
I'll move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Renee Amon seconds it. Discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes.
Okay, thank you very much. And
How about
then
resolution number 2016-02-010R, a resolution in support of increasing the gasoline tax? Mayor Pressing.
right, we did that at the local level, and Champaign followed us, and it seems to be working well. We didn't really have anybody complaining because taxpayers, when they can see how their money is being used and it's used in a way that they like, are going to support funding it. So the federal and state gasoline taxes have been constant for decades, and they're not keeping up with the demand, the requirements for maintenance, let alone construction. So our roads and bridges in this country are deteriorating, and I think that it would be reasonable to increase the gasoline tax because the cost to consumers is going down. we have increased fuel efficiency, so people are using fewer gallons. So if you keep the price per gallon the same, obviously they're going to pay less. And plus, the price is down now. But I think that one of the major things that we can accomplish is to spur the economic development and the jobs that we need in Illinois. I think a classic way to do that is to provide funding for roads and bridges. And so therefore, I'd like to see us request that the Illinois legislature carefully consider the costs and benefits of increasing the gasoline tax at the state level, and that they also request the Illinois congressional delegation to do the same thing. And I got that idea by reading the history of land-grant universities, and Jonathan Baldwin Turner was the one who had this idea that we should have these land-grant universities. He went to the Illinois legislature and asked them to ask our congressional delegation, which they did. And our congressional delegation recruited Justin Morrill of Vermont to sponsor the Morrill Act. And as a result, we have probably the world's best system of higher education. So anyway, that's the idea. Work together with some other communities and get the attention of the legislature and help to solve some of our problems.
All right, I entertain either conversation or a motion. Or Neiman's.
So the resolution would be to move the legislators to do a statewide increase.
Right, because we don't get enough money from the state. I mean, that's why we're having our local tax, but you can't keep a tax constant in cents as inflation takes effect over, 20 or 30 years and not change the tax, because the cost of maintaining roads and bridges is going up. So you need to have the funding source go up.
And so do we think that just from our standpoint in the city of Urbana, an increase would actually allow us to really address the concerns that we have with our infrastructure?
It would help. It would help, and this would be a statewide effort, and I think it would be a jobs creation move. And I think we just need to talk about this with other communities and talk to the legislature.
Eric.
I certainly appreciate a lot of the thinking that went behind this resolution. I'll listen to everybody. I'm probably not going to support it. And the reasons are manifold. One is that I think that the cost of fossil fuels and the impact of fossil fuel taxes and fossil fuel consumption is not isolated. I mean, to pick this one thing out from the whole issue of where we should be going with respect to energy. And so for example, and the other thing is that gasoline taxes are regressive. They hit lower income people harder. I think that there are other, when I was thinking really hard about state issues, when Naomi was in the legislature, of course she sponsored a bill to levy higher taxes on, a bill to permit, or a constitutional amendment to permit progressive income tax. The other thing is that if the state increases their gasoline tax, that gives us less room to increase our gasoline tax if we need revenue. So and we can use that money for, I think if you ask Bill, when I asked Bill, hey, how are we doing keeping up with our streets and our potholes? And he said, oh man, we're falling behind. So we could use that money right here if we're going to talk about increasing gasoline taxes. So while I definitely appreciate the historical analogy, and I definitely think that it's very good to speak up when it's appropriate about state and national issues, I don't think this is the right vehicle for that.
Okay, so other comments or a motion? Charlie Smythe.
You know, I don't agree with Eric, except that it's a regressive tax. You know, many nations charge much, much more in taxes, but they use it for not just their roads, but they use it for public transportation and things like that. I will also remind you that this tax also helps pave the roads that our bicycles run on. So I sort of have mixed feelings about it, but I think it makes a great deal of sense to have to increase the tax on this because it also encourages more efficient use of the fuel. So I can flip your argument in that sense. Is, you know, we don't have a carbon tax in this country. We probably need one, and this is the closest thing we have. And frankly, you know, it hasn't been used in the progressive way that other countries have used it. So I'll move to send to council the recommendation for approval.
All right. Do we find a second here on the council?
Second.
Diane Marlin. All right. Conversation? Yes.
I just wanted to say I agree with Eric.
Hey, there's a milestone.
You know, we build bridges in this community, and we set new goals, and we discover new truths here.
We build bridges, not walls.
All right.
I would.
And then, okay, Diane Marlin.
Well, I'll make an observation. I was talking to my brother-in-law who lives in Nebraska, and they have Lincoln, Nebraska, as a matter of fact. And they, I'm not sure what their state gasoline tax is, but they have a wheel tax that they pay in the state of Nebraska, and that is dedicated toward a street and highway construction. And so we're going to pay one way or the other. We don't have a wheel tax in Illinois. Our license plate fees are fairly low compared to other states. We are desperate at this point for funds to keep up with our infrastructure, not just roads and bridges, but the pipes that are under the roads and bridges. And the state and federal government have failed to keep pace with the needs of the local communities. So till I see an alternative, I think this is a targeted, reasonable way to go. And it's ridiculous to have fallen this far behind. And when you visit other countries, you can see what a country that actually invests in infrastructure looks like. And our country is beginning to not look like one.
Barry Ammons.
So for me, on the way out, trying to address the concerns, especially about those who are the lowest earners being hit with yet another form of tax. I'm not going to be able to support that. And I like the idea of course, us having nice roads and stuff like that. So why don't we, you know, like bond for like $8 million and use the motor fuel tax to pay that money back over the course of a few years, and we can generate jobs here locally. We could get the roads done the way that we want them done, and we don't have to depend on the state to get it done. So that's an investment into our roads and our infrastructure as well.
All right, Charlie Smythe.
You know, I keep forgetting that I want to raise the issue of what our ending time is. You know, we used to start at 7:30, and our ending time is 11. And now we start at 7, and we still end at 11. And you know, when Eric and Mike start agreeing with each other, I know the hour is late. So with that, please remind me that I want to put that changing our rules to end at 10:30 on our agenda for committee in the future.
Okay, pretty wise. Well, where is this going to go? I guess I'm going to say those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I think we should maybe see hands. Okay, I'll say yes. Opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, well, that's pretty close, but it passed.
You guys win.
Okay, thank you very much.
You want to adjourn us, Dennis?
Yeah, okay, I forgot about that. Okay, we stand adjourned.
We have to stay.
Sorry, guys.